The pendant burned against Lyra's sternum like a brand of ice and fire. She pressed her palm to her chest as she guided the last tour group of the day through the winding cobblestone streets of Tidecross, her voice steady and warm, despite the agony radiating through her bones. And here we have the old lighthouse, built in 1823, which has guided ships safely to harbor for over 200 years. The tourists snapped photos, oblivious to the way her left leg trembled, threatening to give out. The pendant, a supposedly ancient family heirloom she claimed was just sentimental jewelry, was failing. After 5 years on land, 5 years of forcing her body into a shape it was never meant to hold, the magic was finally cracking. She could feel the fractures spreading through the enchantment like hairline splits in glass. Soon, very soon, it would shatter completely. And when it did, her legs would dissolve back into the powerful tail she'd been born with, right here in the middle of the bustling coastal city she'd sworn to protect. "Miss Lyra, are you all right?" An elderly woman touched her elbow, concern creasing her weathered face. Lyra smiled, bright and false. "Of course, just a bit tired. It's been a long day." She gestured toward the harbor, where the massive royal palace loomed over the water like a crown of white stone and gleaming bronze. "Now if you'll look to your left, you'll see King Theron's palace. He's been our ruler for 7 years now, and under his command, Tidecross has become the most prosperous port in the known world." She let her voice fade as her group turned to admire the palace. Her eyes, however, weren't on the architectural marvel or the royal banners snapping in the wind. They were on the water beyond, dark, churning, wrong. The ocean was sick. She'd felt it for weeks now, a poison spreading through the currents like blood in water. The industrial plants upriver had been dumping their waste directly into the channel, and it had finally reached the sacred current, an ancient artery of magic that connected all the world's oceans. Her father, the Deep King, had sent 3 emissaries to the surface to investigate. None had returned. That's why she was here, after all. A spy in plain sight, monitoring the humans who seemed determined to destroy what they didn't understand. The pendant pulsed again, and this time her knee buckled. "I'm so sorry, everyone," she gasped, catching herself against a stone wall. "I'm afraid I need to cut today's tour short. Please enjoy the rest of your evening in Tidecross." She didn't wait for their concerned protests. Limping, she made her way through the narrow streets toward her tiny apartment near the docks, each step an exercise in controlled agony. Just a few more hours. She could make it a few more hours, and then she'd swim out past the breakwater and remove the pendant, let herself be whole again for one precious night, while she begged the ocean for enough power to repair it. Thunder cracked across a clear sky. Lyra stopped, her blood running cold. That wasn't normal thunder. That was the sound of the ocean's fury, a warning she'd only heard once before, during the great drowning that had swallowed 3 coastal cities a century ago. The sky darkened with unnatural speed, clouds boiling up from the horizon like smoke from an invisible fire. The wind shifted, no longer carrying the salt-sweet scent of healthy sea but something toxic, something rotting. No, not now. Not when she was this weak. But the ocean didn't care about her weakness. The sacred current had finally responded to the poison in its veins, and it was going to purge itself, along with everything in its path. Lyra ran. By the time she reached the cliffs north of the city, the storm was fully upon them. Rain lashed sideways in sheets, and the ocean had risen impossibly high, waves crashing against the harbor walls with enough force to shake the ground. In the distance, she could hear screaming, the crunch of wood, the desperate ringing of warning bells. The city was going to drown. Thousands would die, and there was only one way to stop it. Lyra collapsed on the cliff's edge, her legs finally giving out completely. She could feel them beginning to change, bones shifting, skin rippling. The pendant's magic was almost gone. Good. She'd need every ounce of her true power for this. With shaking hands, she ripped the pendant from her neck. The transformation was instantaneous and excruciating. Her legs fused together, bones restructuring, scales erupting across her skin in waves of silver and deep blue. Her lungs burned as they shifted, preparing for both water and air. When it was done, she lay panting on the rocks, her powerful tail where her legs had been, her true form finally restored. But there was no time to savor it. Lyra pulled herself to the cliff's edge and opened her mouth. What emerged wasn't a human sound. It was the voice of the deep places, the song of ancient power that had calmed storms and called down lightning since before humans built their first boats. The siren song poured from her throat, wordless and devastating. It rippled through the air like visible waves, spreading out across the furious ocean. The water responded immediately, the chaotic waves beginning to organize, to fall back, to obey. She sang of calm depths and gentle currents, of the peaceful dark where nothing disturbed the silence. She sang the storm down note by note, pouring every ounce of her strength into the melody. The ocean listened. The ocean always listened to the royal blood. She didn't know how long she sang, minutes or hours. Time lost meaning when the song took over, but gradually, impossibly, the storm began to die. The waves subsided, the wind calmed. The clouds started to break apart, letting through shafts of silver moonlight. Lyra's voice cracked and failed. She slumped forward, utterly spent, barely conscious. She'd done it. The city was safe. Now she just needed to slip back into the water before anyone found her like this, exposed and vulnerable. There, the word cut through her exhaustion like a blade. Lyra's eyes snapped open. Standing at the top of the cliff path, surrounded by a dozen armed guards, was the Harbor King himself. Theron of the Iron Coast had never believed in magic. Legends, yes, useful for controlling the masses, for invoking tradition, for justifying rule. But actual magic, that was children's tales, stories to frighten sailors and sell books. Until tonight. Until he'd stood at his palace window watching his city about to be destroyed, and felt something wake up inside his blood. The song had hit him like a physical blow. One moment he was barking orders to evacuate the harbor, and the next he was on his knees, every nerve in his body screaming with an alien sensation he had no name for. It wasn't pain. It was recognition. Need. As if something dormant in his very DNA had suddenly opened its eyes and roared, "Mine." His guards had found him collapsed on the marble floor, blood trickling from his nose. His hands clawed into the stone as if trying to anchor himself against an invisible tide, trying to pull him toward the sea. "Find it," he'd gasped, the words torn from some primal place he didn't know he possessed. "Find what's making that sound." They'd looked at him like he was mad. "Your Majesty, we hear nothing but the storm. Find it!" And somehow, guided by an instinct that felt older than his own lifetime, he'd known exactly where to go. North, to the cliffs, to her. Now, looking down at the creature collapsed on the rocks, impossibly beautiful, undeniably inhuman, with a tail that gleamed like starlight on water, Theron felt that roaring in his blood crescendo into something that terrified him with its intensity. She was trying to pull herself toward the cliff's edge, toward the water, and escape. She was so weak she could barely move. "No," he heard himself say, and his voice sounded wrong, layered with something ancient and hungry. "You're not leaving." The siren? Because that's what she was. Gods and ancestors help him. The legends were real. Turned her head to look at him. Her eyes were the color of the deep ocean, and they were filled with exhausted terror. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse from singing. Even broken and raw, it made something in his chest tighten painfully. "Please, I saved your city. Let me go." Let her go. The words made no sense. How could he let her go when every instinct in his body was screaming at him to take, to claim, to keep? "You're the one from the legends," he said, descending the path toward her. His guards moved to follow, but he held up a hand to stop them. This felt intensely private, this moment of recognition. "The royal siren who commands the storms. My family has been hunting your kind for 10 generations. Your family killed my kind for 10 generations, she corrected, trying again to drag herself toward the water. "Murdered us for our scales, our bones, our voices. Do you want a trophy, King? Is that what this is?" "No." The word came out harsher than he intended. He knelt beside her, and she flinched back. Good. She should be afraid. He was afraid of what he was feeling, of what he was about to do. "I want to understand what you did to me. That song. I felt it in my blood, like you were calling to something inside me. Sea hunter blood," she panted. "Your ancestors made a pact with the siren centuries ago, took her power into their line. It resonates with our song, makes you better predators of my kind." Her laugh was bitter. "Congratulations. Your heritage is working exactly as designed. The Sea Hunter blood. He'd heard the stories, dismissed them as myth meant to make his family line seem more impressive. But the moment she'd started singing, something had awakened in him. Something possessive and predatory and absolute. He should kill her. Lock her up. Give her to his scholars to study. There were a dozen rational courses of action. Instead, he found himself reaching for the dagger at his belt. It was an old blade, passed down through his family line, the hilt carved with symbols he'd never understood, until now. They were sigils of binding, of claiming, sea hunter marks. "What are you doing?" The siren tried to pull away, but she was too weak. "Please, I'm no threat to you. I've been living in your city for 5 years. I've only ever tried to help." 5 years. The revelation should have shocked him. Instead, it made perfect sense. The tour guide. "Lyra, that's you." Her silence was confirmation enough. Theron pressed the dagger's tip to his palm and drew it across, letting his blood well up dark and red. The ancient instinct guided him, whispering what to do. He reached out and placed his bleeding palm against her shoulder, where neck met collarbone. "No," she thrashed weakly, but his other hand held her still. Gods, she was so delicate like this, so perfectly formed. "Don't, please, you don't understand what that will—" The blood mark flared with sudden searing light. Lyra screamed, arching back as the sigil burned itself into her skin. Not just surface deep, but into the magic that made her what she was. Theron felt it too, a white-hot connection forging between them, melding his will to her power. When the light faded, a mark remained on her skin, an intricate brand of his family's sea crest, glowing faintly with its own inner light. He could feel her now, feel her exhaustion, her terror, her fury, and underneath it all, he could feel her power, vast and deep and ancient, now leashed to his command. "What did you do?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face as she touched the mark. "What did you do?" "I claimed what's mine," Theron said, and he meant it with a conviction that shook him to his core. He lifted her easily. She weighed almost nothing in this form, and she didn't even have the strength left to fight. "Guards, bring blankets and a tank of seawater, now." "Your Majesty," his captain ventured carefully. What is that?" Theron looked down at the siren in his arms, at her inhuman beauty and her bound power, and smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "This," he said, loud enough for all his men to hear, "is proof that the legends are real. This is my greatest weapon, and my most prized captive. Tomorrow, all of Tidecross will know that their king has captured a siren, and they will know that nothing, not magic, not monsters, not the ocean itself, can threaten us now." Lyra closed her eyes, and he felt her despair through the brand like it was his own. But underneath that despair, he felt something else, a flicker of defiance, of rage, of power not quite fully chained. It should have worried him. Instead, it thrilled him. The hunt was over. The claiming had begun, and gods helped them both. He was never letting her go. The palace aquarium had been built for exotic fish and decorative displays. Now it served as Lyra's prison. They'd given her the largest tank, 20 feet across, 30 feet deep, filled with seawater pumped directly from the harbor. Theron had ordered cushions placed around the edge, as if that somehow made it less of a cage, as if the brand burning on her shoulder didn't remind her with every breath that she was his possession, his weapon, his thing. She'd been here 3 weeks. 3 weeks of being displayed like a curiosity, of nobles and merchants and foreign dignitaries coming to stare at the captured siren. Theron kept her tale visible during these viewings, never bothering to offer her the dignity of concealment. "Let them see what I've conquered," he'd said the first time, and the pride in his voice had made her want to scream. But she couldn't scream, couldn't sing, couldn't even hum without his explicit permission. The brand saw to that. Lyra floated in the center of her tank now, in the quiet hours before dawn when the palace slept. This was her only real solitude, these stolen moments when Theron's overwhelming presence wasn't bearing down on her, because that was the worst part of the brand. Not the control over her voice, not even the humiliation of captivity. It was the connection. She could feel him, always. His emotions bled through the brand like ink in water, his satisfaction when she obeyed, his frustration when his counsel challenged him, his dark pleasure whenever he looked at her. And sometimes, in the deep of night, she felt his dreams. Dreams of drowning, of the ocean calling him home, of a promise broken and a debt unpaid. At first she'd thought the dreams were hers, memories of the sea bleeding through. But no, these were his, and they terrified him. She could taste his fear like copper on her tongue. The brand worked both ways. She'd discovered that by accident. The first week, when desperation had driven her to test the limits of her cage. She couldn't speak without permission, couldn't use her voice as a weapon. But when Theron slept, when his guard was down, she could whisper thoughts into his mind. Gentle suggestions, subtle influences. The fishing quotas are too high. The ocean cannot sustain this harvest. The industrial plants upriver. They must be regulated, controlled. Perhaps the legends have wisdom worth heeding. It wasn't much, but it was something. And slowly, so slowly he didn't notice, his policies were beginning to shift. "You're awake early." Lyra's eyes snapped open. Theron stood at the edge of her tank, dressed only in loose sleep pants, his chest bare. The early morning light caught the scars on his torso. A king who'd fought his way to power, not inherited it peacefully. His dark hair was mussed, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. She could feel that exhaustion through the brand. He hadn't been sleeping well. The dreams were getting worse. "I don't sleep much anymore," she said quietly. Speaking without his direct command always felt like a small rebellion, even though the brand allowed basic conversation. Hard to rest when you're a carnival attraction. Something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or irritation. "You're not a carnival attraction." Yours? She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "Yes, you've made that abundantly clear." Theron was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he moved, climbing the steps to the tank's edge and sitting down, dangling his feet in the water. Lyra instinctively moved back, but there was nowhere to go. "The nightmares," he said abruptly. "They're getting worse. I see a woman drowning. She's screaming my name, but it's not my name. It's older, different, and I'm the one holding her under." He looked at her, and his eyes were haunted. "You're doing this. Somehow you're putting these dreams in my head." Lyra's heart hammered. She'd been so careful, only planting small thoughts, gentle suggestions. She'd never tried to send the dreams. Those were bleeding through on their own. "That's not me," she said. And it was the truth. "That's your blood, Theron. Your heritage. The Sea Hunter Pact. It's not what you think it is. Explain." It wasn't quite a command, but the brand thrummed with potential. She could feel his need to understand. Sharp and desperate. "Your ancestor," she began slowly. 10 generations ago. He didn't just hunt a siren. He loved one. They made a pact. Her power for his protection. But something went wrong. He became obsessed. Possessive. He branded her. Bound her voice. "Just like you've done to me." She met his eyes. And then he drowned her. Because he couldn't bear the thought of her ever leaving him. The pact turned into a curse. It's carried down through your bloodline, waiting for another siren to trigger it. Theron's face had gone pale. "That's insane." "Is it?" Lyra swam closer, daring to approach. "Tell me, King, did you choose to brand me? Or did it feel like instinct, like something guiding your hand?" His silence was answer enough. "Every time you use the brand," she continued, "every time you command my voice or feel satisfaction from the connection, the curse digs deeper. It's turning you into him, into a man who can't distinguish between protecting and possessing, between love and ownership." "I don't love you," Theron said harshly, but she felt the lie through the brand. Not love, no, but obsession, need, a hunger that was growing stronger every day. "Not yet," Lyra agreed, "but you will. The curse demands it. And when you do, you'll destroy me just like he destroyed her. Unless what? This was the moment. The dangerous gamble she'd been building toward for 3 weeks. "Unless you let me help you break it." Theron laughed, sharp and bitter. "Let you help me? So you can escape?" "I can't escape," she said, touching the brand on her shoulder. It pulsed with warmth, and she knew he felt it too, felt the connection between them throb like a second heartbeat. "This isn't something you can just remove. It's blood magic, bone deep. If I swim away, it'll kill me. If you die, it'll kill me. We're bound, Theron, whether either of us wants it or not. She could see him processing this, could feel his shock and horror through the connection. But I can negotiate with my people, she continued. The sacred current is still poisoned. That's why the storm came, why your ships keep disappearing, why monsters are attacking your harbor. The ocean is angry, and it will keep attacking until the balance is restored. Let me help you make peace with the deep, and maybe, we can both survive this curse. The attacks had started 2 weeks after Lyra's capture. First, it was just strange sightings, massive shapes in the deep water, fishing nets coming up shredded. Then 3 ships vanished overnight, their crews never found. Then the harbor seals began dying, washing up on shore with their insides turned to black sludge. Theron's council was in an uproar. Some demanded they kill the siren as punishment. Others wanted to use her as a hostage, threatened to destroy her if the attacks continued. Only a few, the ones who'd been listening to his recent policy changes, who'd noticed their king's sudden interest in ocean conservation, suggested negotiation. Theron had refused all suggestions, because the truth was, he couldn't bear the thought of Lyra being harmed. The brand made her suffering his suffering, yes, but it was more than that. When she was in pain, something in him raged. When she was frightened, he wanted to destroy whatever threatened her. It was getting harder to tell where the curse ended and he began. Now, standing on the harbor docks at midnight, watching something massive and bioluminescent circle beneath the water, he knew he was out of options. "Call it back," he commanded, and felt Lyra's consciousness snap to attention through the brand. She was in her tank back at the palace, but the connection worked at any distance. Whatever that is, call it back to the deep. Through the brand, he felt her hesitation. Then, "It won't listen to me while I'm bound. My voice has no authority. The brand marks me as human property, not royalty. Then what good are you?" he snarled, watching the thing rise closer to the surface. It was enormous, bigger than any whale, with tentacles that glowed like diseased stars. "Let me speak freely, just for this. Give me back my voice, and I can send it away." Theron's hand went to his chest, where he could feel the echo of the brand on his own skin, invisible, but present. Giving her back her voice, even temporarily, felt like cutting off his own arm. The thought of her power being beyond his control made him physically ill. But the monster was surfacing, and he could hear screaming from the docks. "Fine," he growled. "Speak, but only to send it away." The brand's hold loosened, and even from a distance, he felt Lyra's gasp of relief. Then her voice came, not through words, but through the brand itself, carried on whatever magic connected them. She sang, and Theron fell to his knees. It wasn't like the storm song. This was gentler, but no less powerful. A lullaby from the deep, a mother's voice calling her child home. The monster responded immediately, its agitation calming, its massive form sinking back into the dark. When silence fell, Theron was shaking, not from fear, from the aftershocks of her voice moving through him, lighting up every nerve. It felt like coming home and falling off a cliff at the same time. "Thank you," he felt more than heard. "I'm ready for the brand to close again." But he didn't want to close it, didn't want to cut off that sensation of her power moving through him, of being connected to something so ancient and vast. "No," he heard himself say. "Not yet. Theron, come to me." The command was out before he could think better of it. "I'm sending a carriage with a water tank. Come to me now." He felt her shock, her confusion. She couldn't walk anymore. The pendant was destroyed, and he hadn't offered her another way to maintain human legs. How did he expect her to come to him? But the brand didn't care about logistics. It only cared about his will. 20 minutes later, they carried her to him, still in the water tank, her tail visible to everyone on the docks, the royal guards trying to maintain some semblance of dignity in the bizarre procession. Theron dismissed them all and approached the tank. In the moonlight, Lyra was luminescent, her scales catching the light like mother of pearl. The brand on her shoulder glowed faintly, and he realized with a start that there was a matching mark on his own chest now, visible as a faint silver outline when the moonlight hit it right. They were mirroring each other, becoming something neither of them had been before. "Why did you call me here?" she asked quietly. Theron didn't have a good answer, only the bone-deep need to have her close, to feel her presence. To know she was his and his alone. The attacks, he said instead. They'll keep coming. You know that. Yes. Then help me stop them. Properly. Not just sending away one monster at a time, but actually fixing whatever's broken. Lyra studied him for a long moment. You'd have to let me negotiate with my people. Let me speak as royalty, not a captive. That means removing the brand. No. The refusal was instant, visceral. Then thousands will die, Theron. My people won't stop until the sacred current is healed or your city is destroyed. Those are the only endings here. There's a third option, he said. You negotiate for me, with the brand still in place, but I give you the authority to speak. You're still mine, but you act as my ambassador. Your ambassador. Her laugh was hollow. You mean your puppet. I mean my partner. The word hung between them, heavy with implications neither wanted to examine. Through the brand, he felt her warring emotions, hatred and exhaustion, and gods help them both, a flicker of something that might have been hope. If I do this, she said slowly, if I help you make peace with the deep, you have to make real changes. The industrial plants shut down, the fishing quotas cut in half, protection for the sacred sites along the coast. Real, permanent changes. Done. She blinked, surprised by how quickly he agreed. But Theron had been making those changes already, guided by the whispers she'd been planting in his dreams. He'd just needed an excuse to justify them to his council. And one more thing, Lyra added. When this is over, when peace is made, you try to break the brand, not remove it. We both know that's not possible, but we find a way to weaken it, to give me back some of my autonomy. This he hesitated on. The thought of loosening his hold on her made something primal and possessive rise up in him, screaming that she would leave, that she would slip away into the deep and he'd never feel her presence again. But he looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the weapon or the trophy or the possession, but a woman who'd saved his city and gotten enslaved for her mercy. A woman who was trying, against all odds, to save both their peoples from mutual destruction. A woman who deserved better than what he'd made her. All right, he said, and felt her shock ripple through the brand. You have my word. When this is over, we find a way to weaken the brand. Through their connection, he felt something he hadn't felt from her since the night of her capture. Trust. Fragile, tentative, but real. It terrified him more than any sea monster ever could. Because if she learned to trust him, if this thing between them became something other than captor and captive, the curse would have them both, and history would repeat itself in drowning and blood. But that was a problem for later. For now, they had a war to prevent. Tell me how to contact your people, Theron said, sitting down at the tank's edge and reaching out, slowly, carefully, to touch her hand where it gripped the rim. The brand flared warm at the contact, and he felt her sharp intake of breath. Neither of them pulled away. There's a place, Lyra said quietly, her fingers tightening fractionally against his. 3 miles north, where the cliffs meet the deep water, at the dark of the moon. That's where my people will come, if you call them. If we call them, Theron corrected, and for the first time since he'd branded her, Lyra smiled, small and sad and dangerous. Yes, she agreed, if we call them. The dark of the moon was 3 days away, 3 days to prepare for a negotiation that would either save them both or doom them. 3 days for the curse to dig deeper, for the brand to tighten, for the line between protection and obsession to blur beyond recognition. Theron should have been afraid. Instead, sitting in the moonlight with his hand still touching hers, feeling her consciousness intertwined with his own through blood and magic and something that had no name, he felt only a dark, possessive satisfaction. She was his. The brand proved it. The curse demanded it. And gods forgive him. He was starting to want it. That was the most dangerous thing of all. The dark of the moon came with blood in the water. Lyra felt her father's approach before she saw him, a pressure in the deep, ancient and furious, moving through the ocean like a living storm. The Deep King had come, and he'd brought an army. She stood, or rather balanced, at the cliff's edge where Theron had first captured her, her tail coiled beneath her in the shallow tidal pool they'd constructed for the negotiation. Theron stood beside her, one hand resting on the hilt of his ancestral blade, the other unconsciously close to where the brand's echo marked his chest. They'd barely spoken in the 3 days leading to this moment. The brand had been pulled taut between them, thrumming with unspoken tension. Lyra could feel his fear, not of her father's army, but of losing her. The obsession had been growing, fed by the curse and watered by proximity. Sometimes she caught him staring at her with an expression that made her blood run cold. Possession so absolute, it had become indistinguishable from devotion. And the worst part? She could feel herself responding to it. The brand created a terrible intimacy, a forced understanding that was beginning to erode her hatred. When he dreamed, she dreamed with him. When he hurt, she ached. The boundaries between them were dissolving, and she didn't know where she ended and he began anymore. The curse was working exactly as designed. "They're here," she said quietly. The ocean began to glow. Hundreds, no, thousands, of bioluminescent forms rose from the deep, sirens and selkies and creatures with no human names. At their center, massive and terrible, was her father. The Deep King breached the surface with a sound like thunder. He was twice the size of any normal siren, his scales dark as the abyss, crowned with coral and bone. His eyes, the same ocean blue as Lyra's, fixed on his daughter, and she felt his rage like a physical blow. "Lyra." His voice resonated through the water and air simultaneously. "Daughter, what has he done to you?" She touched the brand on her shoulder and felt Theron tense beside her. "Father, please, I called you here to negotiate." "Negotiate?" The Deep King's laugh was bitter as brine. "I see my daughter marked like cattle, bound to a human king, her voice chained. There is nothing to negotiate. Release her, or I will tear your city from the bedrock and drag it into the deep." Theron's hand moved to his blade. Through the brand, Lyra felt his territorial fury rising. "She stays with me, but we can discuss terms for peace." "Terms?" Her father's tail lashed, sending waves crashing against the cliffs. "You dare speak of terms while wearing my daughter's power like a trophy? Father, listen." Lyra tried to project calm through the water, using the diplomatic training she'd received as a royal child. "The sacred current is poisoned. We can fix that together. The humans will shut down the industrial plants, reduce the fishing, protect the coastal sanctuaries. King Theron has already begun making changes." "Because you whispered in his dreams?" Her father's eyes narrowed. "Yes, little one, I know. I've felt your consciousness these past weeks, trapped and struggling. I know what that brand is. I know what it does." He turned his attention fully to Theron. "Do you know what you've done, human king? Do you understand the magic you've invoked?" Theron's jaw was tight. "I know enough. You know nothing." The Deep King moved closer, and his army moved with him, a living wall of teeth and power. "That brand is not your invention. It is a remnant of a pact made 10 generations ago, between your ancestor and a siren named Thessaly. She loved him. She gave him her power willingly, to help him protect his people from a great threat." Lyra went very still. This wasn't the version of the story she'd told Theron. "But love was not enough," her father continued, his voice heavy with old grief. "Your ancestor became obsessed. He couldn't bear the thought that she might choose the ocean over him, that her love might not be eternal. So he used the pact to brand her, to bind her voice, to own her completely." The Deep King's eyes glittered with ancient pain. "Thessaly was my sister, and your ancestor drowned her in these very waters when she tried to break the brand and return home." Theron had gone pale. Through the brand, Lyra felt his horror, and underneath it, recognition, the dreams. The woman drowning, screaming a name that wasn't quite his. "Thessaly. The brand is a curse disguised as power," the Deep King said. "Every generation it waits for another siren to trigger it, so it can replay the same tragedy. Possession becomes obsession. Obsession becomes destruction. And in the end, the human drowns the siren, because he cannot let her be anything other than his." "No," Theron said, but his voice was weak. "I wouldn't you?" Lyra's father gestured to the brand glowing on her shoulder. "You've already branded her, already claimed her, already begun making her an extension of your will. How long before you cannot distinguish between protecting her and imprisoning her? How long before the thought of her autonomy feels like betrayal?" Theron said nothing. Through the brand, Lyra felt his turmoil, because the Deep King was right. The possessiveness had been growing, becoming something darker and more consuming. There were moments when Theron looked at her, and she could feel his need to keep her, to own her, to never let her go, burning so hot it felt like madness. "Release her," the Deep King commanded. "Break the brand. Let my daughter come home, or I will wage war on your city until nothing remains but ruins and coral." "I can't." The words tore from Theron like a confession. "The brand. It's not just her binding to me. It's me binding to her. If I try to remove it, it will kill us both." "Then you've doomed her," Lyra's father said quietly, "because the curse has only one ending, and it is written in drowning." Silence fell, broken only by the sound of waves and Lyra's racing heart. She could feel the armies gathering, her father's forces in the water, Theron's guards moving into position on the cliffs above. War was a breath away. Thousands would die, human and Mer alike, because of a curse neither she nor Theron had asked for. "Unless there's another way," Lyra said suddenly, her mind racing. "The brand can't be removed, but it can be broken." Both Theron and her father looked at her. "Father, you said Thessaly tried to break it. How?" The Deep King's expression was anguished. "She tried to sever it herself, using a coral blade to cut it from her flesh. But the brand had grown too deep, merged too completely with her magic. The attempt nearly killed her, and when she was weak from the effort, your ancestor, he couldn't finish. But she almost succeeded," Lyra pressed, "which means it is possible. The brand can be broken from the inside, if someone is willing to pay the price." Through the brand, she felt Theron's sudden, sharp fear. "Lyra, no, not me," she said quietly, looking at him. "You." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by horror. "The brand binds both ways," Lyra explained, "as much for the watching armies as for Theron himself. It gives you power over me, but it also anchors you to me. The sea hunter blood in your veins, that's not just predator instinct. It's the remnant of the original pact, the willing gift of power that your ancestor corrupted. To break the curse, you have to break the corruption. You have to renounce the claim." "I can't," Theron said hoarsely. "You said yourself, the brand will kill you if I die. If I cut it out." "You won't die," Lyra interrupted. "The brand has a weakness. It feeds on possession, on the need to own and control. But if you willingly give up that control, if you release me, truly release me, not just physically but emotionally, renouncing all claim to my voice and my power, the curse has nothing to feed on. It will break itself." "And what happens to me?" Theron's hand moved to his chest, where the echo of the brand pulsed. "This thing has become part of me. I feel you in my blood, in my bones. If it breaks, it will take the sea hunter blood with it," the Deep King said, understanding. "The power your family has carried for 10 generations. The strength, the predatory instinct, the ability to sense magic in the water. All of it will burn away. You will become fully human, mortal, vulnerable, ordinary." Theron looked at Lyra, and through the brand, she felt the full weight of his anguish. The sea hunter blood wasn't just power. It was the foundation of his rule, the source of his legendary prowess in battle. Without it, he would be diminished, weakened, possibly unable to hold his throne against rivals who would see his loss of power as an invitation to challenge him. "And if I refuse?" he asked quietly. "Then we go to war," her father said. "And the curse completes itself. One way or another, my daughter dies, and your city drowns in blood." Lyra felt Theron's mind racing through the brand, trying to find another way, any other way. But there wasn't one. The curse had been waiting 10 generations for this moment, and it would not be denied. She took his hand, the first time she'd willingly touched him since the branding. "You're not him," she said quietly. "You're not your ancestor. You can make a different choice." "Can I?" Theron's laugh was bitter. "Lyra, I can barely stand the thought of you swimming 10 feet away from me. The idea of you in the ocean, beyond my reach, where I can't feel you or protect you or know you're safe, it makes me want to tear the world apart. That's not love. That's the curse. And I don't know where it ends and I begin anymore." "I know," she said, and meant it. Through the brand, she'd felt every shade of his obsession, his possessiveness, his desperate need. "But you can choose to fight it. That's what makes you different. You can choose to let me go." Theron closed his eyes. Through the brand, she felt him reaching for something. A memory, maybe, or a version of himself that existed before he'd heard her song. A man who'd ruled fairly, who'd cared about his people, who'd wanted to be more than just a conqueror. When he opened his eyes again, they were clear, determined, terrified. "All right," he said. "Tell me what to do." The ritual required the ancestral blade, the same one he'd used to brand her, and blood drawn at the dark of the moon with witnesses from both kingdoms. Theron stood at the cliff's edge, bare-chested, the blade in his hand. The brand on Lyra's shoulder was glowing so brightly it hurt to look at, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. She could feel his terror through the connection, his grief, his desperate last-moment urge to call it off and keep her chained and safe. "It has to be your choice," she reminded him gently. "If you're doing this to save your city, or because you think you should, the curse won't break. You have to genuinely want to release me. All of me. Forever." "I know." His voice was rough. I need you to understand. What I'm feeling. The need to keep you, to own you. I know it's the curse, but underneath that there's something real. Something that might have been good, in a different world, without this magic poisoning everything between us." Lyra's throat tightened. "I know," she said. "I feel it too. But this is the only way we both survive." Theron nodded. He pressed the blade to his chest, over his heart, where the echo of the brand glowed silver. "I, Theron, last of the Sea Hunter line, renounce my claim over Lyra of the Deep Court." His voice rang out across the water, witnessed by thousands. "I release her voice from my command. I release her power from my control. I release her life from my keeping. By blood and blade and broken bond, I set her free." He drew the blade across his chest, cutting through the brand's echo. The pain hit them both simultaneously, white-hot and absolute. Lyra screamed. Theron fell to his knees. The brand on her shoulder began to burn, the magic consuming itself, feeding on the curse's own power as it unraveled. Through the disintegrating connection, she felt everything he was losing. The sea hunter blood burning out of his veins, the predatory instinct dying, the supernatural strength draining away. He was being unmade, transformed into something lesser, something human. And underneath the agony, she felt his choice, his genuine, devastating choice to let her go. The brand shattered. Lyra gasped, suddenly alone in her own mind for the first time in weeks. The absence of Theron's presence was shocking, like losing a limb. She touched her shoulder. The brand was gone, leaving only a pale scar in the shape of his family crest. On the cliff, Theron had collapsed, blood streaming from the cut on his chest. His guards rushed forward, but he waved them back weakly. "Is she free?" he gasped. Lyra dove into the water, swimming to where he lay. His eyes found hers. No longer connected by magic, no longer bound by curse. Just a man and a siren looking at each other across an impossible divide. "I'm free," she confirmed. "Thank you." He smiled, small and pained. "Don't thank me yet. I just lost my greatest weapon, and my throne probably won't survive the year. Then it's good you're about to gain an ally," the Deep King said, moving closer. His anger had faded, replaced by something that might have been respect. Any king wise enough to break a curse rather than succumb to it is a king worth supporting. You will have the Deep's protection, Theron of the Iron Coast, and my daughter will remain as ambassador, not captive, but willing liaison, to ensure the peace between our kingdoms. Theron looked at Lyra, surprise and hope flickering in his eyes. "You'd stay. Not in a tank," she said dryly, "and not at your command. But yes, the sacred current still needs healing, and someone needs to make sure you humans don't poison it again." She paused. "Besides, I've spent 5 years learning to love this city. I'm not quite ready to leave it." What she didn't say, what she couldn't quite say, not yet, was that breaking the curse hadn't erased everything. There were still echoes between them, memories of intimacy that the brand had forced, but that had, perhaps, become something almost real. Something that might be worth exploring, carefully, once they'd both healed from the trauma of what they'd done to each other. But that was a future concern. For now there was peace to be brokered, and a kingdom to save. Theron struggled to his feet, refusing help, and extended his hand to the Deep King. "Then let us begin negotiations, as equals." Her father studied the offered hand for a long moment, then grasped it. As equals, he agreed. 5 years later, Lyra walked along the beach at sunset, her legs, maintained now by a pendant that was a gift, not a prison, steady beneath her. The sacred current was healing. The fishing quotas had been maintained, and the industrial plants had been replaced by clean energy that Theron's engineers had developed with guidance from the Deep Court's magic. Peace had held, mostly. She found Theron sitting on their rock. She'd started thinking of it as theirs, somewhere around year 3, watching the waves. The scars on his chest had faded to thin silver lines, barely visible. He'd held his throne despite losing the Sea Hunter blood, ruling instead with wisdom hard-earned and alliances carefully maintained. He'd also grown quieter, more thoughtful. The loss of the predatory instinct had changed him in ways she was still discovering. "You're late," he said without looking up. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten. Forgot our weekly argument about tidal zone development regulations?" "Never." She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Besides, I was dealing with your northern fishing fleet. They've been pushing the boundaries again. I'll handle it." He finally looked at her, and his expression was complicated. Affection, regret, longing, all carefully contained. "Lyra, can I ask you something?" "Always. Do you ever wish I hadn't broken the brand?" The question came out rushed, as if he'd been holding it back for years. "I know it was the right thing to do. I know. But sometimes I still dream about it, about feeling you in my mind, about knowing you were there, always. And I wonder if you miss it too." Lyra was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun paint the water gold. "Sometimes," she admitted. "The brand was a curse, and it was destroying us both. But it also let me know you in a way I'll never know anyone else. There was an intimacy to it that She trailed off, struggling with words. "I miss knowing what you're feeling. I miss the certainty." Theron's hand moved slowly, carefully, until it covered hers on the rock between them. No magic pulsed at the contact. No brand forced them together. Just skin on skin, warm and real and chosen. "I'm terrified of you," he said quietly. "Not because you're dangerous, though you are, but because I don't know how to want you without the curse guiding me. I don't know if what I feel is real or just an echo of the obsession. And I'm terrified that if I let myself love you, I won't be able to tell if it's genuine or just the brand's memory." Lyra replied. "So we're both trapped between what was forced and what might be real." They sat in silence as the sun sank lower, their hands still touching. Finally, Theron spoke again. "What if we tried, slowly, carefully, with no magic and no binding, just two people trying to figure out if there's something real underneath all the curse and trauma?" Lyra looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who'd captured her and claimed her, but also the man who'd sacrificed his power to free her, who'd spent 5 years trying to be better, to rule with wisdom rather than strength. "I think," she said slowly, "that might be the scariest thing either of us has ever attempted." "Probably," Theron agreed. His fingers tightened fractionally on hers. "Is that a yes?" Lyra smiled. A real smile, not the careful diplomatic expression she wore for courts and councils. "Ask me again in another 5 years, if you're patient enough to wait." "I can be patient." He shifted closer, and she let him. "I've got nothing but time, and nowhere else I'd rather be." Over the water, a song began, Lyra's kin singing the evening hymn, welcoming the stars. Theron couldn't understand the words anymore without the Sea Hunter blood, but she could see him listening, trying, and somewhere in the growing dark, with her hand in his and the ocean singing them home, Lyra felt something uncurl in her chest. Not the forced intimacy of the brand, not the poison of the curse, just possibility, fragile and uncertain and entirely their own. It was enough. For now, it was enough.